Hey y'all, I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey on finding answers and finding solutions to things I was dealing with. I do like to read a lot and I find a lot of answers in books. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a book from John Maxwell called Failing Forward. I'll show it to you, but it's probably backwards, but this is the book. And it has some really great topics in there, but some of them really struck a chord with me. And one of the things that stood out, literally jumped out of the page at me, was he says, the first important step to weathering failure is learning not to personalize it. And going through all the challenges and things we did through our religious episodes, or whatever we want to call it, was believing that we were failures, believing that we had no control over the situation or the things that were taking place. And this does come from the things that were lined out for us, the ability to take choices, make choices taken away from us, the ability to use critical thinking skills, any of that stuff that was stripped from us. And internally, I felt like I was a failure and I had no control over that. And as I was reading through this book, he talks about purposelessness, and it really was fascinating to me how to see it through his eyes and how it so was a reflection of my own situation. But in purposelessness, he talks about self-pity, excuses. I had every excuse in the book. And they were good excuses, perfectly logical. They would stretch to fit any situation. Misused energy. He says, constant fear divides the mind and causes a person to lose focus, which that was very, very true. My energy was spent doing menial tasks and just busy work all day. So I didn't have time to even think or focus on the things that were really important to me, like the big rocks of my life. And then hopelessness. And I lived so many years of my life in hopelessness. It was like you were in a dark tunnel and there was no light at the end. You did not know what you had to look forward to. And going through these situations, there were so many things that made me wonder. I would always question, what am I doing this for? Why does it have to be this way? Does anybody else feel like things are off? But we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't bring it up and openly discuss it. And you never knew who was your friend or who was going to report you. And so digging into myself and working towards getting to a place to where it did not matter what anyone else thought, what anyone else's perspective was, whether they would shun me or not. It didn't matter because I knew I had to do what was right for me. And another quote in this book was, "It is easy to dodge our responsibilities." For me, it was easy to dodge what I felt was really what I needed to do for my family. However, we cannot dodge the consequences of our responsibilities. And I knew all of that would fall back on my shoulders. There was a time, a several year period, where it was me by myself with 18 children. My sister wife wasn't there. My husband was sent away, and we were homeschooling, and we were sewing for the storehouse. We did canning. There was all kinds of work projects, all kinds of things that everybody was required to be a part of. And it was very interesting to me how I did not feel that my children should participate in it if I couldn't, because the kids could not tell me where they were going. They could not tell me what they were going to do. They could not tell me who was there or even what building they were going to be in. And as a mother or anybody that I had care of, I could not ask where they were and be told without having condemnation spewed all over me. So when I read this, it really speaks out to me, because if it is my responsibility, what things am I willing to change? What things can I change? And when I started looking at things like that, I go to my experience of breaking my ankle. I had never had a broken bone in my body. And for some weird reason, I got my shoe caught on a little metal hook, like a piece of the metal that was coming off of the stairs that had the concrete poured into them. And it caught my shoe and it twisted my ankle clear back around. And so it shattered every bone in my ankle. And this was when my husband had been gone for almost a year. And he couldn't communicate with us. He wasn't supposed to associate with us at all. Well, I had to go in for surgery with this ankle. And after the surgery, I could not help myself. I had to have home assistants come and help me have a shower and take care of myself and help get the kids dressed and combed. And I relied on my children so much to help me. They had to drive me to all my appointments and take my baby. Like the day I got home from the hospital I think I got home around 4 p.m. I had to leave again and to be in St. George at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is an hour away, for my baby to get tubes in his ears. And there was no way I could have anybody else help me because I was the only one on the birth certificate. And the doctors and the people at the hospital said, you have to be there or we're not going to do the surgery. So things like that I look at as a blessing, because I had to use my children for my own personal needs, for my family, for the things that we had to do to keep going. And there was a space there for several months that I could not walk. I could hardly get around. After I think 6 weeks, I got a little knee scooter and was able to get around that way. But through this time, I felt like that we were being protected from the things that were taking place in the religion. And my children had to be where I was because I needed them. I couldn't care for anybody or anything. And so I would lay in the chair and direct everybody. I would gather the kids around me, and sometimes if I felt like I could handle it, we'd read for a few minutes. And through all of this, it kept my kids from being involved in the things that were going on that were awful. For one, where I could not know what projects they were called to. And I know personally of the oldest daughters of the home at the time that were called to projects that they didn't get seen again for many months, and nobody knew where they were. Their mothers didn't know. Their fathers weren't there, and their mothers were just told to be at peace because this is the will of the prophet, and they've gone on to bless and do what he wants them to do. And there was a lot of fear around the things going on, and fear for our basic salvation. However, fear for our existence, fear that we weren't going to get the food we needed, fear that we weren't going to have the financial means to cover our utility bills or even to have enough gas to get to appointments. And through all of this, it drew my children closer to me, and it helped really paint a picture of the things that were going on, of the detrimental things that were taking place in people's lives that they could not talk about. They couldn't share with anybody. And I want to say there is hope. There is so much hope for us out there. Wherever we are, there is hope. And failure is an inside job. So don't ever, I'm speaking for myself, to not ever allow verbiage or actions that would speak failure for me to internalize it as a failure. Things that are said to me or ways that I am treated that I would internalize as a failure. And now I look at them, I look at those situations, and I just have to think, you know what? They were probably having a really bad day and they couldn't even talk to anybody. They couldn't share that they were hurt with anybody. And so they had to point it at somebody else. I hope this makes sense. Sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, it's just a big old can of alphabet soup trying to just pull letters out of it and make sense of things. But going through this process of putting these short little stories together, little incidences, and looking at them from a whole different perspective is really bringing up some healing and some things that I needed to clear with myself and I needed to forgive myself for. And with that, I will see you tomorrow.